Hello, my name is Blake McMillan, and so I'm going to be doing my close reading on The Donger and Me. So what we're going to see here to start is the first panel. It's going to open up with which looks like a flashback scene, so it looks like we're setting the stage for what's inevitably going to come later in the story. Set of characters' motivation. So it starts with, this girl talking to this guy being shown progressively to be our protagonist. So he's talking to this girl about, we assume, what her favorite movie is in their little text bubbles. So she says her favorite movie is 16 Candles, as a guy does, trying to impress her, even though he's never seen the movie, which is clearly shown in the following panel underneath. He's like, I love that movie. So what does he do? The next thing he does is he immediately goes to what we assume is the movie store. Now, in the previous lesson, in this same lesson, it talked about how less is more a lot of the time. So in this panel, you can see there's really not much here other than, these little rectangles, him holding a rectangle. We get the context from the last bubble, but we do see right here comedy, which leads us to assume that he's in a movie store without actually all the detail. Again, it allows for us to make our own assumptions, which the assumptions very easily made since they're talking about a movie. So everything is already set up in context clues right there. Another thing we're going to notice is in the top left corner, and this is a consistent theme throughout the panel, we're going to have the dates, but not only just the date to set up the situation, but specific scene-to-scene labels. So let's see. I believe we're going to move after that from these two panels to The Donger and Me, the title. So that's going to just break up the scene for just a second to give you an idea. Now, for me, it took me a second because I've only seen 16 Candles once, so I didn't really understand necessarily what was going on at first. But right here, I'm actually seeing this guy. Then I understood it was the Asian American character in it, which leads to the next panel that night. So by the time you get to here, if you didn't know what's going on here, or 60 Candles or what they're talking about, this picture is straight out of the movie. So it should give you a better idea. So you see that night transitioning to the next scene in this panel where he says, what's happening, hot stuff, right? Which, as an Asian American, as our main protagonist is, he's a stupid fucking asshole because clearly he's offended by what's going on here. So it continues to show the next day, or what we presume to be the next day back at school. First in art class, again, each panel is sequenced just by what point of the day it is. They're not even given specific times, just this class is clearly first, lunch is in the middle, and that kind of breaks up the time frame. And then you can see all his classmates, since the film came out around this time, that was dated earlier in the first panel, 1988. So it's a popular movie. People are, consistently quoting it, making jokes about it, and our character here being the seemingly, at least in these first flashback panels. Also, the flashback scenario kind of being indicated by the old kind of sepia tone instead of the vibrant colors that we see in the present day later in the page. Anyway, so it just shows him getting, jokes from other classmates, and him kind of, being sad. Again, we don't get any verbal cues. We just get the visual cue of him, looking sad, him eating alone in the lunch panel, still getting, jokes made and people harassing him, basically. The next panel, we see the math class, and you see booming and ha ha ha. So these are just examples of picture specific sound effects, including down here where it says infamous gong sound, that, they put in movies and stuff, is a really good example of a picture specific sound effect. It's also going to parallel the kind of, I guess, mindset that we can assume that our protagonist is in. Everywhere he goes, it's just jokes about him being Asian. So now we progress downward. So we moved out of the 2 boxes, 1 box, 2 box, and then this straight line of panels right here. So now we're going to move into a fairly normal sequence. So we jump to the future, clearly dated right here. 2001, it's a couple years later, so he's an adult. Just from the context of the images, you can kind of see that, and it's not really expressed in the word bubbles or the conversation the character's having, but just by the settings, that this would be potentially our protagonist right here, now a little bit older, a friend or his girlfriend or somebody who has a close relation to him that he's talking about these personal issues that he's had in the future. In the past. So what it looks like is that he is some kind of comic book artist, I would assume. So he's talking to I'm going to assume it's his girlfriend, about going to an interview. And now this interview that he's doing, he's going to be interviewing what looks to be the actor who played this character in 16 Candles for some reason or another. I don't see how it corresponds with what his job is, but nonetheless, so we get the general idea that he wants to hate this guy, right? So he has a deep-seated just hatred for what that character did, and kind of he feels like he's responsible for ruining his adolescent life. So in this interview, he feels like he's going to go in and hate him, and then it turns out, as we can see here, we get very little context clue. We get part of a joke that, out of context, probably doesn't make any sense, but we see in the next panel our protagonist laughing and enjoying himself, right? So he goes back and he talks to his girlfriend, and he lets her know, like, wow, this guy really won me over. This is fantastic. And we can see here, he's back in his normal setting, which just in the panel right above, you can see that he was very concerned. He was, a little bit angry over here, very livid. And then right here, there's just so much more lightness. Even the color of his clothes, being a bright blue, could also be a context clue visually, kind of bringing more levity to the situation. So then we move down here to the bottom. Again, next day, sequencing everything. Now his impression is that he's a funny, honest guy. He enjoyed it, and even though he has a very political correct viewpoint on everything, just the person that the actor was alone was enough to have him just not really care about that anymore. So what it looks like is he says he kind of admires him. It seems like everything's good. A week later, he's back to watching it again with another woman. So maybe this was his sister or something else, or just a friend, or vice versa. We don't really know. We don't really get exactly that context, but it definitely seems as though like this person is who he's closest to, since it's the person that he's venting to. So we come down here to the final panel, where they're watching what we assume is the movie again, and he sees that actor again, and he is immediately offended by him again, which brings us full circle back from the beginning. So even though the character isn't down here again, it does move him back out of frame right here on the little TV, so we can assume that it is the same situation again, which just kind of completes the story arc. It's a full circle, as well as it's a funny, light way to end a topic that could be offensive to some people, but it is from this character's perspective. So it is it's a little lighter to read and understand, and should be taken a little bit more comedically, I would assume. So yeah, that is my analysis. If I missed anything, please feel free to ring me in the comments when I post it up, and I'd love to hear everybody's feedback. Thank you.